Good morning, it's Friday the 4th of September and it's time for Boris's Best of British Bulletin. Scottish Tory branch office supervisor Douglas Ross MP, or as he has become affectionately known, Dross, seen here making promises he would fail to keep once elected, has been very busy. He has been producing economic proposals to power up Scotland. A central idea unveiled by Dross to create jobs and boost the nation's prosperity in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic was a promise to allow public sector organisations to give preference to local businesses when handing out contracts. I have to confess, I was initially impressed. It sounded great, it sounded simple, and it made perfect sense that local councils should be able to use and support local businesses. In fact, it almost made too much sense to be a Tory policy at all. And that's because it wasn't. It was in fact an SNP idea from 2 years ago, and is already Scottish Government policy. So, just like his boss, he's been caught copying Nicola Sturgeon's homework. This time for a test, which was 2 years ago. Almost too predictably, Dross's boss hates the idea. A UK bill which is being brought in to ensure there are common frameworks across the UK after Brexit, in areas such as public procurement, animal welfare and consumer standards, does not allow public sector bodies to give any geographical weighting when it comes to awarding tenders. The UK Internal Market Bill states, the non-discrimination principle will be a requirement not to discriminate between individuals or businesses based on residence or origin within the UK. Direct discrimination is where an individual or business is treated differently and unfavourably by another administration in an explicit manner compared with local operators when operating in another part of the UK expressly on the grounds of resident or geographical origin. So, in short, the UK Internal Market Bill will mean that current Scottish Government policy will become illegal under UK rules, and that local councils can no longer give preference to local businesses. That in turn means that when Aberdeenshire Council needs a shithouse unblocked, they won't be able to call a local plumber, they'll have to call Serco or Sitel. How wonderful, given that we all know how incompetent Serco and Sitel have been. You'd almost think that Dross was making up this promise as he knows deep down that he'll never actually be First Minister. He'll never have to deliver, because he can say what he likes. And even in the infinitesimally small possibility that he did become First Minister, he still wouldn't have to deliver it. Not only because it's already been fucking delivered by the SNP government, but his boss is actually going to make him pull back on it when the UK Internal Market Bill goes through. You can almost imagine that scene from Top Gun reenacted, with Dross as Maverick and Boris as the dumpy and inexplicably sweaty Admiral. Now Dross, your ego's right in check your body can't cash. So that's that then, Dross. Back to the branch office drawing board for you then. Not content with annoying Boris, he's also annoyed the National Farmers Union of Scotland, which, unlike the Scottish Conservatives, is actually a separate and distinct organisation from the RUK version. On a radio show, Dross was challenged on his voting record on post-Brexit trade, including his vote against a clause which sought to protect high food standards and prevent produce such as chlorinated chicken from being sold in Britain. Dross defended himself by saying that the NFU Scotland's policy director, Johnny Hall, had told him that no MP had voted to reduce animal standards or biosecurity standards. But Johnny Hall hit back later and claimed to be fuming with the comments made by Dross. On a later show, Mr. Hall said, I was fuming at the time and I remained very concerned that an honest and very straightforward answer to a question has basically been turned 180 degrees to misrepresent a situation where I think people are being misled. Dross has actually had 3 opportunities to vote to ensure that UK food standards are protected. And I'll give you a clue how much times he did it. It's less than 1. Because, and well, you wouldn't believe this, it goes against the UK Internal Market Bill. So just to recap, Dross has conceded defeat to the SNP on his first day supervising the branch office, annoyed local veterans by missing a VJ Day commemoration in favour of a football match, never a good look in a constituency with a military base, annoyed farmers by misrepresenting their representatives, never a good look in a constituency with loads of farmers and your actual dad is an actual farmer, annoyed the actual Conservative leader with a Scots economic plan which flies in the face of the proposed UK Internal Market Bill. He challenged the UK Internal Market Bill when it comes to government procurement, but also acquiesced to the same UK Internal Market Bill when it comes to food standards, and made an amazing sounding promise that he won't actually have to keep under any circumstances. I'm not sure how Dross will recover from this. I know. How about hiring a failed MP to be a key advisor? Hiring incompetent chums like Baroness Dido fucking Harding always seemed to work for Boris. So the incompetent and indecisive former MP Kirstine Hare has been brought into Dross's branch office management team. So decisive is Kirstine that she sat out the biggest issue in UK politics in decades, Brexit. She says, "I didn't vote on Brexit. I took the decision not to vote on it. It was incredibly difficult. The first time I've never voted in my life. It was very difficult because you had two arguments and they're both very strong on both sides." She explained, "I just ultimately couldn't make the decision, and I thought I would therefore go with the will of the UK, which, if I'm honest, I thought would be to remain, but I left that to everyone else." Well, with weather-vane-like consistency of direction, we can soon look forward to Kirstine Hare joining the campaign for Scottish independence as it surges into the majority. In the meantime, Dross can look forward to decisive advice like, and, "Well, I'll just sit this one out," or my personal favourite, "It's just too difficult so I won't bother," from his new key advisor. Social media can be a minefield. Scottish Tory branch office MSP Annie Wells learned that yesterday with a hilarious tweet. Now, everyone likes to be popular, don't they? And what's almost as good as being popular? Well, of course, that's looking popular. In this image, you'll see that a group called Women to Win tweeted their support of a cheap attack Annie Wells made on the SNP Health Secretary. But Women to Win is a group that Annie Wells leads and is the Twitter admin for. 5 minutes before that one, she tweeted this. As you'll see, she supported her own comment with her own profile before realising her mistake and changing it to the first photo you saw. Yes, Annie Wells tweeted praise for herself from her own Twitter account as she forgot to switch before backing herself up. Wells later allegedly awarded herself a magnificent medal, as seen here. In UK Tory news, Chris Grayling has resigned from the Intelligence Select Committee as he couldn't keep up with the other MPs, which kind of makes it a good thing he never got to chair it as intended. Poor old failing Grayling. When he heard that being a member of the Intelligence Committee meant that the security services would provide him with intelligence, he thought it was like his favourite childhood movie, The Wizard of Oz. You remember it, don't you? Where the Scarecrow wants the wizard to give him a brain. Mr. Grayling was totally caught off guard when he realised not only was he not getting a brain transplant, but he actually had to bring some intelligence of his own to the role, which is a challenge, if you are Chris Grayling. He looked in his rucksack and in his packed lunch box, but he couldn't find any. Now, where had he left it? Obviously, his mum hadn't packed it for him before she dropped him off at Parliament that day. Unable to find any intelligence of his own, or buy any in the tuck shop, he called his mum to come pick him up. So now, a man down, but with a corresponding sharp rise in average IQs, the Intelligence Select Committee soldiers on. But what about Chris Grayling? Well, he hasn't been forgotten about. Boris is forming a new committee just for him. The prestigious new Bellendery Select Committee. Who knows? He may even get to chair this one. In BBC News, get it? Tim Davie took over as Director General from Lord Tony Hall. Davie has previously been a Tory candidate for councillor and has been with the BBC since 2005. It has emerged that Davie is planning to tackle left-wing BBC comedy. He reportedly believes the broadcaster's output is seen as too one-sided and needs to be overhauled. Meanwhile, it emerged that comedy panel shows will be told to book guests with a wider range of views on issues like Brexit. No problem there. There are plenty of right-wing comedians to choose from. Rees-Mogg, Grayling, Johnson, even Patel for a bit of gender and totally ironic racial balance. Tory MPs welcomed Davie's drive to make comedy on the broadcaster more balanced. So instead of left-wing comedy, we can all look forward to Friday evenings of right-wing tragedy. Perhaps they'll commission a new series of The New Statesman. Perhaps Jacob Rees-Mogg could be Alan Bastard, and Chris Grayling could be his witless mate Piers. Except this time, it wouldn't be a comedy. It'll be reality fucking television. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson recently turned on Ofqual over the exam algorithm, but they have bitten back. It turns out that the Education Secretary was offered 3 options to deal with the exam problem: socially distant exams, delayed exams, and finally, the least favoured assessed grades. Guess who got to make the decision? Yeah, you guessed it, Gavin Williamson. And we all know which one he chose. Meanwhile, in Scotland, our Education Secretary still enjoys cordial relations with the SQA, as he didn't try to throw them under a fucking bus. Former Australian PM Tony Abbott has been hired by the International Trade Secretary Liz Truss to work for the UK government as a trade envoy. To be honest, Liz Truss needs all the help she can get, as part of her plan was to sell British land to New Zealand, which is kind of like exporting whiskey to Scotland, or perhaps selling incompetence to Chris Grayling. But Abbott is a controversial choice. On a personal level, is an offensive, aggressive, leering, gaffe-prone, homophobic misogynist the right person to represent our country overseas? Well, we've tried that already with Boris's foreign secretary, and it didn't go well. Just ask Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. And on a professional level, this is someone with no hands-on experience of negotiating trade agreements, who denies the climate change we believe should be at the heart of our trade policy. But according to Johnson and Truss, he's a trade expert. So on that note, Harold Shipman was a highly trained doctor. Fred West was an expert at laying a patio. Joseph Fritzl was an expert tunnel digger. And finally, Adolf Hitler was brilliant at national infrastructure projects. But the biggest issue is the fact that Tony Abbott is actually being paid by a foreign government. Yes, he still draws an Australian government pension of 300,000 Australian dollars. That's about £165,000. But allegedly, being paid by foreign governments isn't that unusual in Westminster circles these days. So that's okay then. And finally, after Boris Johnson spent half of this week's PMQs telling us to get back to work and send our kids back to school, almost too predictably, Parliament then voted in the afternoon so MPs could continue working from home for another 13 weeks. To summarise, folks, this is just 1 week. Just one more painfully crappy, but also painfully normal week in Tory Britain. You know, if this situation was being like a coyote in a trap, you'd chew your own foot off to escape, wouldn't you? But if you're Scottish, you don't have to go to those extremes. All you've got to do is vote SNP in May, and when you get the chance, vote for independence. Which leaves us with one question. Are you yes yet? Folks, thanks for watching. Feel free to comment on the Facebook page. Keep it civil and impersonal. Let's not be in each other. Love you all. See you next week. DaviePHD.